Hello, my name is Vili, and you are listening to Humans of Authenticity. Our guest today is Ericka Ochoa. She's a DELP scholar, class of 2007 and 8, and that's how I know her. Welcome to Humans of Authenticity, Ericka.
Thank you so much, V, for having me, for inviting me to this space that I feel that it's important for you to highlight more than our professions, but our humanity, who we are, how we conduct ourselves, because that really has an impact on how we conduct ourselves in our professions as well. So I thank you very much for providing me this opportunity to be invited to your platform. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. I look forward to our conversation today. Would you like to introduce yourself to our listener first?
Sure. So everyone, my name is Ericka Ochoa. I am the manager of educational and career development programs at the American Association of Immunologists. As you know, just to give you a little bit of background on the organization, immunology has been at the forefront since the pandemic. So we have had very important work at my organization of educating the public about the impact of healthcare as a whole, but most importantly, the impact of vaccines and other education that needs to be around communities that are that safety net, where it's very important to really get the word out about how to take care of ourselves and our bodies. With that, my pronouns are she, her, ella. I was actually born in Honduras. I came to the United States in, you don't want to know, but it's been a long time. Came with my little sister and my mom. My mom's purpose was to give her two little girls better opportunities. And although, it was a challenge, we came in the 1980s. My mom really came with no money, but we had a huge family support, which I think it's more important a lot of times than the material, right? The material, the money. And so with that dream, my mom came with that dream to the States, brought her two little girls, and here I am right now. My whole life changed because obviously I had to learn a new language. I had to assimilate to a new culture, new school system. Everything was very different than what I was accustomed to in my country. But like I said, with every challenge comes opportunity. I'll give you some background. I really love business. Ever since I was a little girl, I love business administration, business management, marketing. So my dream was to work for a big corporation after I graduated college. But, going back to purpose, the reality is that I was placed, I feel like, at the right time into the nonprofit association world, which has been my career over the past 20 years. And that's what I know. And I'm very happy that somebody took me by the hand right after college and offered me the opportunity to work at associations then. And I have remained loyal, stay committed to my profession ever since. So that's sort of me in a nutshell.
I like how you say with every challenge comes opportunities, and we hear that a lot from our guests. And in retrospect, do you have a stories that bring that term to life that you can share with us?
Yeah, sure. So, like I mentioned to you, I think that the perfect story is me, right? Being challenged with changing, sort of like veering my career off into nonprofits, because that wasn't really, how, you say to yourself, I have a purpose, right? That's my key word. I have goals, I have objectives in life. And obviously, being in that business arena and really liking business, you tend to be very, I'm very goal oriented, very organized. And so I thought, okay, well, I'm going to go into to work for a big corporation. But along the way, you meet people. That's another important aspect of this. Every challenge can become an opportunity because you do meet people along the way who are going to be your biggest supporters and are going to see something in you especially as a young professional, that you might not see in yourself at that point in time. I was working at that time, so I had to work while I went to college. Obviously, we didn't come from a family that was able to support us. College is expensive here in the United States, but my family, specifically my mom, really believed in pursuing an education. She couldn't pursue an education, but her belief in us getting an education really, it's what motivated and encouraged both my sister and I to continue to pursue even our higher education, because she really believed that, again, going back to the money and material part, really it will come later, but most importantly, the biggest treasure, that's what she would say to us, the biggest treasure that she could leave to us is our education. That was gold, because that was going to back us up anywhere we went. It was going to make us be lifelong learners. It was going to make us be curious. It was going to make us be good people, because what we learned, we could transfer that to other people. And so I think that the biggest challenge into opportunity was veering off into this other path and listening to this person that I used to work with and saying, you know what, you're about to graduate college. I know that you're looking for an opportunity in corporate America, but I have a friend who works at a nonprofit association who's looking to fill a role. And I think that from what I have seen in you, I think that you could do great things in that space. And so I thought about it for a little bit. And then I said to myself, you know what? Why not? Why not give myself that opportunity? I know that I was set in stone in really trying to work for corporate America, the big business, right? Doing the marketing and the management at one of those companies. But I said to myself, I'm going to give myself that opportunity. I'm going to challenge myself. And I decided to go for the interview. I got the job. It was for an anti-drug coalition back in the day. And I started working in public policy. And that work really impacted me. The understanding of how underserved communities really needed support in order to protect children from substance abuse. And also working on prevention programs and really doing the advocacy work in Congress to make sure that grants were given to the safety net to those communities in order to fight and to prevent substance abuse. So, and now in retrospect, I think, wow, that was like a very smart decision, because then I began to understand the power of associations, the power of nonprofits, the power of working for a mission, right? Through mission, making a difference, because that's what we're here for, as working in associations, making a difference, working with people. And then going to conferences. I had the opportunity to also present workshops. One day we did a bilingual workshop, which it was very hard. That was a challenge, because I had to come out and translate word for word what my colleague was saying in English. I remember we went to El Paso, Texas, to serve that community, to talk about the work that we did, to talk about grants and substance abuse prevention in that particular area. But that really propelled my career. Going into that organization really took me to new heights, really took me to understand this profession. And so that's how, right, the challenge of like, you know what, now I understand that not everything has to be set in stone, that you have to give yourself that opportunity in order to further your learning. You have to really challenge yourself, and don't forget where you come from, who you are as a person. And I had the same passion that I had, right, when I thought, I want to be in business. But that passion has translated into this mission-driven profession that I have now.
That is really cool. I particularly like the part about giving yourself opportunities, because we all get out of the house every morning. We're going to work, trying to make a differences, but sometimes it's still hard to see that in some abstract form. We still wait for that permission to turn opportunities into something good for us. So I really love how you reaffirm that sense of opportunities for us. So thank you for sharing your journey in nonprofit. If we look at that stories, can you share 3 things that you love about yourself during that journey?
Sure. So yes, 3 things that I love about myself that I can tie back to that journey and that I continue to live by to this day are one, which I think it's crucial, is positivity. I have always had this very positive outlook. And, I know that people might say, oh, but, things are not always going to go your way, our way. And that's true, right? That's true. Things are not always going to go our way, but you have to take a step back and think, this is happening to me for a reason. Because believe me, I have had my challenges throughout my journey, both personal and career wise, but I think is your outlook. I think it's the way that you look at things and you say to yourself, you know what, maybe, for example, this opportunity was not meant for me right now. Maybe there's something else that's coming and I have to wait and I have to have the patience. And it's okay for me to be maybe sad. It's okay for me to feel, a certain way about what just happened to me. But I am not going to allow this to take over, my true self. And so passion, that I would say is one of the things that I really love about myself as well. Having passion, not only being positive, right? But passionate, being committed, right? Passion means being committed to everything that you set forth. Like, I love the work that I have done. Not only so, I started in public policy and advocacy in organizations, but I really I'm a lifelong learner, and I really like the different aspects that an association, a nonprofit offers, which are membership, our marketing, fundraising, operations. It runs the gamut. Our profession is amazing, by the way. And so having that positivity, but also having that passion, that drive, that commitment to be better, to do better in our profession. And then I would say another aspect that I really love about myself is being a relationship builder. I do like talking to people and not surface, like, when I meet someone, I really like to listen. I think it's a good trait to be a good listener, because when you're a good listener, you're able to gain so much from what that person is able to provide valuable feedback to what that person is saying to you. So really listening, it's listening, building those relationships over time. And being a relationship builder also means giving back to your community. My word again was purpose. And so my purpose here of, those words that I just told you that I love about myself, which are passion, which the other word was, passionate with commitment, but also, being a relationship builder means that I am going to give back to my community through the people that I meet, get that word out about the mission. I am also very involved outside of my own profession. I have to say that I'm extremely involved with a volunteer group in the DC area. And that group is the Junior League of Washington. And we do a lot of community service throughout the area. And I have learned so much from the people we serve, so much about, again, how lucky we are. And, we don't think that we're so lucky. But when you go out to those communities that the Junior League is serving, you realize how blessed you are, how lucky you are to have food on your table, to have a roof over your head, to have clothing. So I think that those are probably the 3 words that I really like about myself, the positivity, the passion, and the building of relationships. I want to be with like-minded individuals, which is great. But taking it a step further is not only being with like or listening to like-minded individuals, but it's also listening to differing opinions, right? Because when you listen to different perspectives, that's how we grow as humans. That's how we grow in our professions. That's how we grow in our personal lives as well.
Thank you so much for that. I do see the passions show out through the screen here. Would you like to give a shout out to the Junior League of Washington and the work that they do? And is there a specific project that you've involved with them that you are really proud of that you want to talk about?
Yes, so a big shout out to the Junior League of Washington. The Junior League is of Washington. This is a national organization. Almost every state, there's a chapter of the Junior League. I belong to the chapter of Washington, D.C. of the Junior League. And the mission of the Junior League is basically to spread literacy around the areas that we live. But the league is undergoing a big transformation right now, and they're really focusing on providing grants, really helping, really providing a lot of support to our local nonprofits. So our local nonprofits will be here in the DC area. And it's sort of like the same mission as where we work, as the same associations where we work, right? Providing a network of women, Junior League of Women, providing a network of women, enhancing our skills, whether it's in, understanding, for example, accessibility for people in terms of learning opportunities, to providing accessibility to people with disabilities, to providing accessibility to people. There's a lot of hunger in our area, and I think in every area in the United States. So making sure that people are not going hungry, making sure that children have an equal opportunity to learn. And I really love those aspects about the Junior League. So, and we're 3,000 members, 3 or 4,000 members in the DC area. We're actually one of the largest chapters. So one of the projects that I have been involved with is a nonprofit that is called A Wider Circle, and they are located in Silver Spring, Maryland. And what A Wider Circle does, they're a nonprofit and they provide services to underserved communities. They actually help them with getting them back on track. This is for people who might have been homeless or might have lost their jobs. And, if you lose your job, you lose a lot in this country. It's not easy to get back on track. So it helps people get back on track by providing them with opportunities to find a new job, interviewing skills, helping them write their resumes, but also helping them live with dignity. And what does that mean? Providing them with furniture for their homes. Again, some of them are coming back from homelessness. So providing them with the basic necessities, clothing for interviews. So those are some of the very tangible things that they provide. But I think the mission, right, it is the most important thing. So what I have been involved with through the Junior League is there's a group of us that belong to this committee. It's called A Wider Circle Subcommittee of the Junior League. And on Saturdays, we're able to volunteer. We're able to come in, volunteer, and basically what I have been focusing on is restocking a lot of the professional clothing for the people that are gonna go on interviews, making sure that the clothing is clean, that is hung the correct way. And this might seem like a very basic, what I'm describing to you, service, that other nonprofits do. But I do think it's important to cover this because we're talking about treating people with dignity, right? Making sure that they have clothes that are clean, that where they feel like, what, I can go into this interview and feel very sure, about myself, about who I am. There's a lot of kids' clothing as well, a lot of furniture. Sometimes we have to clean carpets because this organization provides the gamut from dishes to carpets to bedding. Sometimes it's making sure that we put bedding together, from comforters to pillowcases to the cover sheets, put them in groups. And again, because we're trying to really provide, this service of making sure that people feel safe, people that are from vulnerable communities feel safe and feel like there is a platform here. A wider circle is here for you. It's here to help you from the very basic necessities all the way through upskilling you in order for you to be independent and be able to provide for your family. So yes, it's been great work. It has really made me think about not complaining so much about life in general and focusing more on, the things that are important and being grateful for what I have, right? Being grateful for what I have and continue to give back to those who needs us most. So a lot of valuable lessons there through that work.
Thank you for sharing that story. And again, I really see that sense of purpose of you and the passions coming out. And I can see that you're really proud sharing that work with us. So hats off to you for doing the great work for the community around us.
Yeah, and I would tell you, V, that another thing that I think it's really important to say is that the first time that I went to volunteer at a wider circle, and they provide you with an orientation, right? As a volunteer, you have to do an orientation, and I was fine where they were showing us, through the warehouse where all the household items were, the clothing that we had to store was. But then they took us upstairs to the area where they bring up the clothing, the clean household materials, the rugs, the carpets, everything that we clean and that we do. And I would tell you that first day, I really wanted to cry, because I think that first day was really the exposure of understanding that, at least for me, what I think that my problems are, what my complaints were, are like really nothing. That day really helped me put into perspective my purpose.
Yeah, that resonates a lot with me. I had an opportunity to visit a facility in Baltimore that was designed for rehabilitation. So they put people in that facility and similarly provide them with upskills opportunities and clothing and counseling to get them out of drug addictions. But we could really see during that visit the struggling of these individuals. And in retrospections, again, we could really see how lucky we are. And like you say, all of the problem and our complaints, really nothing, because these people had to deal with a lot more difficult situations. That's really put us into different perspective. Thank you for that. And I think this is a good cue for us to move to your selected keyword. Would you like to share with us which word do you select?
Yes, so I selected it. I've been mentioning it throughout the recording here, but I selected purpose.
Yep.
That was my keyword, purpose.
Why is it important that you feel that you want to talk about this?
I had been thinking about that word for a while. So what made me think about this word further was last year. A lot of listeners might not know, but you do know that, we are members of the American Society of Association Executives, ASAE, and their big annual meeting last year, that was their theme, right? Their theme was purpose. And I thought it really moved me while I was at the conference, even prior to that, right? Because they do great marketing, around the conference. And if ASA's intention was to really pull my heartstrings, they did with that theme. So I have to say that they're doing a pretty good job in studying behaviors. And a big shout out to ASAE, because that word has really resonated with me, like I said, ever since they started the marketing and promotions for their annual meeting, all the way up to when you invited me to this podcast. And I immediately knew that my word will be purpose. So just to give you a little bit of background, when I came back from the ASAE annual, I was like, let me look through some podcasts, let me look through some books. What do people say? Let me look at the definition. So what is purpose? What are people are saying? And I started to think, well, what is my purpose? I mean, I have been around, for example, my profession for 20 years now. Am I really conducting myself and really meeting this objective, this purpose? So I started listening at different podcasts, like I said, reading a few books and, reading the definition. And I said to myself, well, I think that what everyone's saying is that you are going to know within yourself what your purpose is. And I don't need to be looking into literature. I did a lot of like soul searching. And I realized that, the reason why I'm here, right? That's sort of like my purpose. The reason why, and I have to go back to my mom. My mom, passed away about 5 years ago, but I do think I carry on the purpose that she had to bring her little two girls here. And her purpose was to give us that opportunity to be lifelong learners, to really be passionate about what we do, to be committed about what we do, to understand that nothing is going to be given to us, nothing is going to be easy, but it's our attitude as to how we look, at that glass. Do we look at half and empty? Do we look at it being full, knowing that we had to be resilient? And so my mom's purpose then becomes my purpose. And I'll tell you why. Because really understanding why you're being put here on earth. And from when I was a very little girl, both my mom and my dad obviously were together when we lived in Honduras. But since I was a very little girl, I remember both of my parents being altruistic and being really hands-on with people who had less than what we had. Even if they didn't have enough, they would always share with people who needed it most. And I grew up seeing that. They didn't have to tell me. I saw them every day, right? I saw those actions. I remember so clearly in my head, this is something that I will never forget. Where we lived in Honduras was in a nice area for the most part. But as you sort of like moved up in sort of like the neighborhood, in that neighborhood, there was a lot of poverty. Honduras is a poor country. It's a third world country. There's a lot of poverty. And there was a family of 3 little kids. And I remember that those 3 little kids, for some odd reason or another, would knock on our door. And my mom and my dad would always provide food for those kids, always. And I remember one day my dad even bathed the kids. You have to remember, it's a third world country. There's no clean water for most of the time, right? Sometimes they cut out the water, they cut off the power. We're talking about extreme poverty here. And that I never forget. I never forget. That lives with me as I grew older, and as of the ASAE meeting, I understood my mom's purpose. I understand it now. I'm here to serve others. I'm here to be empathetic to others. I'm here to encourage. I'm here to inspire. I'm here to listen to people, to listen to their challenges, but to make them feel like they count. So that's my purpose. My purpose is to continue to live on through the values that my parents taught me since I was a little girl. And the reason why I say that too is because now that I see my girls, right? So I have 2 girls, 2 daughters. They're already in their 20s. One graduated college already. And then I have one that's actually graduating next month. I'm very proud of both of them. And I have nephews and I have nieces. And my mom, when she retired, she practically raised my daughters and raised my nieces and my nephews. And my mom's purpose has transcended not only me, but her grandkids. And I feel that that legacy is going to continue to live on. And I am just so proud of it because I see that each of them lives and stays true to their values, right? They're staying true to who they are. They have become passionate about their careers, the careers that they have chosen. And I think it all comes from, like they say, action, from seeing the parents, from seeing the grandmother. If you're a parent that you have to constantly counsel your kids and, and talk to your kids, and there are rough patches here and there. But for example, my oldest daughter, she studied communications. This has come full circle. She's now working for an association, and she works with one of our DELP colleagues, Tamila Blaylock. And
Oh, wow.
yes, and she's doing membership, something that I did for a very long time. And I see the passion in her eyes, because sometimes at the dinner table, we sit down and we talk about our work and our challenges and how we're going to meet those challenges. We talk about generations and how that's impacting the work that associations are doing, and how can we improve the understanding of those new generations coming into the workforce. And I see the passion in her eyes. My younger daughter, she is studying animal science with the hope to apply to veterinary school, and ever since she was a little girl, she had a lot of love for animals. And believe me, their careers have been challenging. Nothing has been easy, right? Nothing is given to anyone. You have to work hard for it. But now that I see them, I see my nephews, my nieces. I have a niece who's a nurse. I have a nephew who's studying radiology. I have a niece, she's still very young, but I see the passion in her eyes for what she does in middle school. My nephew, he's a people's person also. So now I have come full circle myself to understand that my work here, my goal here, it's really to be able to give back to my community, to instill passion in others, to instill that positivity in others, to instill commitment in others. And my purpose all along has been my parents' purpose, which is, again, to help others, to help those who have less. And so that's sort of like a story that has come full circle for me. And that's why I picked the word purpose.
That is really cool. And I can sense a lot of emotions, good emotions and emotional moments when you share that stories. And congratulations on your daughter's achievements, the both of them. You must be very proud. The way that you share the story sounds like everything goes perfectly your way, but I do know that it doesn't come easy. I do know that there are challenges in that journey. If you can share with us some of those moments of challenges, was there a moment when you felt that your sense of purpose was being challenged?
Yes, there were a few moments. There were a few moments, and I would tell you about two of them, because I think are very relevant to this conversation. And I want our listeners to understand, right, that when I say positivity, when I talk about passion, when I talk about commitment, sometimes this is not, it's not as easy as it seems, right? For that puzzle to kind of come together. So one story that I wanted to share was, I have nieces, nephews. About 8 years ago, one of my nephews was diagnosed with leukemia at a very early age. He was only 15 years old, close to being 16 years old. At that moment in time, he still lived in Honduras. There weren't that many treatments at that point in time. And I even believe not now, just because of how much poverty there is in some of the countries in Latin America. So my nephew was told that there were no possibilities there. There was really no hope, and that the disease was advancing, and that he really needed to seek treatment outside. And I remember my nephew reaching out to me. He reached out to me on the phone, and then we had conversations over email about him wanting to get out of Honduras and seek treatment somewhere else. And it was actually very emotional, right? First is the emotional part, because, they mentioned that word cancer. And at that point in time, and even now, it's hard to hear that word because you immediately think death. And so at that moment in time, that was very challenging in my life because my nephew had contacted me directly for help. But as you know, it's not very easy to bring in family members into the United States and specifically to seek treatment. But I said to myself, I am going to do everything that is in my hands to be able to get my nephew here to the United States. So just for you to see how life works. So while I was going to college, I was working at the National Institutes of Health, at the NIAID, the National Institutes of Allergies and Infectious Diseases. And so I learned a lot about clinical trials and, the inner workings of NIH and the different institutes. So going back to my nephew's stories, I actually said, you know what? I have an idea. Let me reach out. I said, I used to work at this organization, governmental organization, a very long time ago, and I know that they have several clinical trials. Let me reach out to them and let me see if something can be done. To make a very long story short, I called NIH. NIH just so happened. See why I tell you? Things happen for a reason. Things happen when you least expect them. They were able to place him in a clinical trial here at NIH in Bethesda. Okay. He came, they sent him all the test kits through me to Honduras. All the test kits came back. And this happened in a span of 3 months. In June, he had sent me the email. I contacted NIH in June. They sent me all the kits, the tests that he had to take to see if he qualified for that particular clinical trial that they were having for young adults and children. And by the beginning of July, they called and they said he qualifies. They processed his visa because, obviously this was a medical issue. And after that, I will tell you, my nephew has been a cancer survivor. And that was one of the toughest points in my life because the not knowing if he's going to survive. And he is so young. And you want an opportunity for him, right? To continue to live his life. Can NIH do something? And at that point, we didn't know, but it was like, you know what? We said to ourselves, we have to try our best and do this outreach. And my nephew came. Now my nephew is a cancer survivor. My nephew just got married last year. And it's a story. And let me tell you, I want no credit because the credit is to my nephew, because my nephew throughout this whole process, and we go back to my mom, right? We go back through, we're a very faithful family. And my mom too, she has so much faith. And my nephew from the very beginning, he said, Aunt Ericka, I want to be healthy. I want to find a cure. And I know I am going to find it. And I said, I know you will, but all the credit goes to him because he never lost his faith. And it was tough. There was a moment when not even his mom could visit him at NIH. They had to do a bone marrow transplant. After they did a bone marrow transplant, all his immune system, right, all his defenses are down. And if any of us visits a patient where there's really no immunity, we can transfer any bacteria to him and he could have died. And so it was tough because not only because of that, but then the recovery period. My nephew had to take about 50 pills a day. 50 pills a day.
Wow.
Eat very healthy, couldn't do certain things during that period of time. So yes, to our listeners, not everything goes as planned. But again, just remember, we all have to remember that we all have a purpose We all have a purpose here. And we all have to try, right? From those trials and tribulations, we all have to try our best to always look for that positivity, to always look for that passion, try to look for that solution. And even if the road, is taking you through multiple, right, smaller roads, veering off this, to the left, to the right, it's our journeys, they're never going to be a straight path. Our journeys are never going to be a straight path. It's always going to take us through trials and tribulations. So that's one of the stories of like really that unknown, but then turning that challenge into, what, we can't focus so much on the negative aspects that all of this is bringing. After the emotional, we kind of like have to turn and say to ourselves, but what can I do to change this situation or to improve this situation? And that really taught me a lot. That was a big, big lesson for me in things not going as planned. Sometimes things such as an illness will really put a damper in your family, how you think about life, how you think about survival. And so I would say that's probably one of like the biggest challenges that I had to face. As you can see, it's not a professional challenge, but more a personal challenge. But it can be translated into professional challenge.
I think it's all about the mindset and the attitude too when you deal with the situation. I'm curious. I know that you have a very positive outlook with you, but how could you keep your positive outlook in situation like that?
I think family. I always go back to the support of the family, how we all came together. My mom, my sister, my aunt, my girls, we all came together. And we said we have to do everything that's in our power to help him. But we're also a family. And myself personally, I'm a person of faith. I have a lot of faith. And even though I know that there are situations that seem really terrible, that seem like you're not able to get out of them very easily. And sometimes this is a true phrase, right? When it rains, it pours. But I'm a firm believer that the reason why that happens is because that rain, that pouring rain, is taking everything, all that negativity away. Roadblocks that are along the way, they're being removed because there's something better for you along the way, and that we don't understand it. Saying to yourself, you know what, I might not understand it right now, why all this, let's say, bad things are happening to me, all these negative things are happening to me. I don't understand it right now, but I understand that 6 months, a year, 2 years from now, I am going to understand why this is happening to me, and better things are going to come along.
I'm hearing that sense of resilience in your outlook and in the way that you deal with scenarios. I want to flip your hat a little bit. I want to bring that conversation into a workplace scenario. So as leaders, how can we be conscious of the sense of purpose of our team? And how can we cultivate the environments or the working environment for our team so that we can honor their sense of purpose in their work?
Yes, so as leaders, I think one of the key words that should be mentioned here is building trust. I think it's critical to the work that we do in order for our staff, in order for our colleagues, the teams that we work with day in and day out, to build that trust, because that trust is critical. And I think that will really kind of like guide you as to how you build out purpose, right? For whether it's a project, whether it's presenting a big strategic plan to your board, whether it's changing course, right? Because we know, and now more than ever, after the pandemic, that I think we all knew before that, but now more than ever, we understand that change is inevitable. And so that sense of purpose comes from really trying to instill trust in those relationships that you build with each of your team members. So what does that mean? Being honest, right? Being honest with your team members, being transparent. It's very important too. It's going to pay off. If there's a challenge in the organization, making sure that you're being transparent, that you're letting the staff know that there are challenges, but that they are going to be conquered and that everybody's going to be part of this team because we all have this common purpose. I also think not only is trust important in building purpose or developing the purpose for your teams, but I also think that really as a leader, I think that you really have to a lot of times take a step back and listen. Yes, talking is great. You know, it's obvious as a leader, you're going to have what they call executive presence and the power of convincing people around the table. But how do you even build that executive presence, right? If first of all, you don't have trust. If second of all, you're not listening carefully, to your team, to what your team is telling you. That's a very important skill. Instead of, talking, listen more. And I would probably say having conversations with your team members. Throughout my career, I have had the opportunity to supervise or lead, more than supervise. I think we need to think in terms of leading, inspiring teams, coaching, right? I know an organization that really calls their VPs coaches, and I think that that's such a neat terminology because that's what we are. We're all coaching. We're all leading. We're not supervising. At least that's the way I feel, or managing. I feel like those are such old terms. And one of the things that I really try to do with the people that I coach, that I lead, is like really have those honest one-on-one conversations. Not only about, yes, obviously the work is there, right? You have your milestones, you have like your objectives, your plans, your work plans that you have to meet, but also conversing about them, having empathy. You have to remember that a lot of times we don't know what people are going through, and the team that you lead, they're humans as well. So really listening to them, conversing with them, not only about their professional, but about how they're feeling. How is it that you want to grow in this profession? How can I be of help? How can I mentor you? Do you want to advance in your career, or are you fine with where you are? And so I do think that going back, in order to sort of like build that purpose, when you're leading teams, when you're a leader, you have to have trust. You have to be a good listener. But most importantly, I think leaders, you really have to lead with ethics. You have to be an ethical leader. You have to treat everyone with fairness and everyone with respect. And that is just going to take you a very, very long way in making sure that that purpose, that mission, that goal, that objective in your organization is met.
This is really cool. So I'm hearing it's all started with trust as the foundation. And I love that. It is such an important commodity that it is so hard to harvest, but so easy to destroy. I'm hearing transparency, which is another term that I really love. And that part about being honest with the team members. I mean, we will not know what problem to solve if the leaders are not being honest and transparent with us, with the challenges that we are dealing with. And I also loving that part about listening with intentions, and that's where we start building in the conversing, look after them as humans, being empathetic to whatever they are dealing with, and being understanding and tolerance to the way that they show up. So I'm really loving this. Thank you again for sharing that piece with us. We are getting to the end of the conversation, so I'd love to know what's next for you in the coming 12 months.
So what's next for me in the coming 12 months? So I'm a lifelong learner, like I mentioned throughout this conversation. And so I think next for me, I really have been focusing a lot more on my mindfulness and also on developing myself into an executive leader. I want to hopefully one day prepare myself for the next level in my career, whether it's in the C-suite or as a CEO. So I've been thinking about this, and I think I am going to enlist the help of a coach to do some coaching sessions, but I also think I am going to enroll in some courses. So I have right now what I do in my current organization. I work in professional development and education, and I really want to delve a little bit deeper into understanding adult learning, but really understanding, because I think that things have shifted so much, right? And I think the changes that I mentioned before with the different generations are here, and we're going to have to embrace them. And so I want to delve more into adult learning, into how these incoming generations are going to affect the way that we carry out professional development opportunities and educational opportunities. I want to learn more about the learner and the member journeys, because I think that those are going to be critical parts of developing programs and educational offers that really are tailored to the different generations that we're dealing with. So that's one. I am going to enroll myself in a course to learn more about course design, adult learning, journey mapping, not only of membership, but also of the learner and the different platforms, right? Because generations, and I think even my generation, I'm Generation X, I even think that we're consuming information very different and learning very different. So learning more about those platforms, I think it's important for the kind of work that I do and what I want to continue doing moving forward, but also doing that personal sort of like mindfulness for myself, taking care of myself by working with a coach, taking an executive women leadership management course. I'm looking at different universities where I can take a course like that online to develop more those executive leadership skills. So that's sort of like what I have in store for the next 12 months in terms of like career. In terms of personal, I think it's more like continue to work on boundaries, making sure that I have enough time to do what I love, continue to giving back to my community, continue my work outside of what I do, continue to work with the Junior League of Washington, and continue to try to make a difference. Even if it's a small difference, it matters, because there are other people that think like me. And so the more people that think like me, the bigger this mission becomes, and the more that we can do to make an impact in those communities that really need us. There's a lot of food insecurity, lack of education, or lack of healthcare. And so I am going to continue to do that, continue on my journey to help others.
Thank you so much for sharing that. And I know that you already have an MBA, and I know that you already have a CAE, and here you're still talking about a lot more learning under your belly. So it feels really exciting and inspirations. And I really see that lifelong learner's path that you cover for yourself. It is exciting 12 months for you. So we're getting to the last question of the episode, and I hope you have fun with this one. If you were going on a dream vacation tomorrow, what is the one item you would take with you and why?
If I was going on a vacation tomorrow, I can only take one item with me,
Yeah.
and why? Can it be a pet? My daughter, right? My youngest daughter, she loves animals so much. My home has become sort of like an animal lover's home. Like we're
Nice.
housing a lot of animals. And she recently brought two cats that she rescued from Virginia. She goes to Virginia Tech, and these cats needed rescuing. And so I have developed this love for my cat. Her name is Isa. And
Aw.
so the one thing I will bring with me will be Isa. I will tell you, when I was going through my CAE journey, I didn't have Isa then, but I already had a cat. Her name is Frankie. My husband actually rescued Frankie from the
Right.
street. And so Frankie, I will tell you, when I was studying for my CAE, I would take breaks. This exam is very intense.
Yeah.
And it requires a lot of hours. But I do remember that somebody had told me, you need to take breaks and they need to be intentional. So I would take breaks by playing with Frankie. And Frankie really, I don't know what it is about pets, but I relax when I was around her. And I really took that break. I felt like this sense of, this is so peaceful right now. Then I will come back to my books and I will be ready to learn again. So that's why I will bring my new cat Isa with me, because I know she makes me feel safe. She makes me feel loved, and I want to protect her. It makes me feel good that I have this great animal that I can protect, and I can give a lot of love and get a lot of love back as well.
What I love about this is here you are in a scenario when it is about you and you still want to bring something that you can serve and protect. So it's really go back to the purpose that you're sharing in these entire stories. This is the end of the episode. Thank you again for your time and thank you for sharing your stories with me and with my listeners today.
Thank you so much, V, for the opportunity. I had been very excited to share my story with you and with your listeners. Thank you again for the amazing work that you're doing, showcasing not only our professions in associations, but also our humanity, like you mentioned in the name of your podcast. So thank you so much for having me. Hi, my name is Ericka Ochoa, and you're listening to Humans of Authenticity.